Hey, welcome to this course. This course was one of my Skillshare courses, and for some reason I no longer teach on Skillshare. Enjoy this free course and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Hey, my name is Erfan and welcome to this course. Adobe After Effects is the industry standard tool for motion graphics and visual effects. And in this course, we will learn the basics of After Effects. At first, we will learn about panels in After Effects. Then we will learn about shapes and basic animation. Then we will design this interface animation. During the design phase, you will learn concepts such as masking in After Effects, working with TrakMatte, parenting, using pen tool and type tool, working with transform property, creating realistic movement with puppet pin tool, and so many more. For your class project, students will also design a user interface and they will animate it. However, if you feel like you can design, you can use my practice file. Once again, welcome, let's start. Alright, we are inside of Adobe After Effects. If you open your After Effects for the first time, you will have a screen like what I have in here. But if your screen is different from what I have in here, just go towards Window panel and in Workspace, select Default. And if it is still on default and it looks different, click on Reset Default to save layout. Now, After Effects interface is a bit confusing if you are viewing it for the first time, but you will get familiar to it very soon. So let's divide this screen into sections and I will explain each section. Well, the first one is your project panel. This is where you store your data. By data, I mean compositions, layers, audio, files, and so on. This is our composition panel where we see our data. You will understand what I mean in the next video. And this is your timeline. The timeline panel is one of the main panels used for creating animations. It indicates the current frame that is being displayed, moving as the animation or composition is played. These are submenus in After Effects where we'll learn about them as we move forward. In order to create an animation, we will need a composition. Well, a composition is a container where you can layer multiple files together to create a file known as a composite. Layers can be created from many different kinds of files, from Illustrator and Photoshop assets to movie and audio files. Now, if I click on the new composition in here, I can create a composition. But first, we need to learn the basics of a composition. The first tab is composition name, where we can name our composition. And right now, I'm going to call it main. The next tab is preset. It indicates the output your animation, whether it can be a 1080 video to a 4K video. You can also add a custom width and height for your animation. Right now it is set on 90/20 and 1080. And in here you can lock the ratio and also you can change it in here. And the next one is frame rate, which is the important one in a composition setting. A frame is a single still image displayed by the computer, and the higher the frame rate, the smoother animation you have. The best frame rate for animation is 24 frames per second. However, for traditional frame-by-frame animation, you can choose 50 or 12 frames per second. Right now, we will set it on 24, and now this is the resolution render quality, which we're gonna put it on full. And in here, we can set a duration for our animation. In our case, I'm going to put it on 8 seconds. And last one, this is our transparent background color. Right now, it is set on black. Now, let's hit OK. As you see, I have an 8-second composition where my background is black and my composition now is saved on the project panel. Now, in the next video, we will learn about shapes in After Effects. Alright, so in our last video we have learned how to create a composition in After Effects. Now in this video we will learn about tools in Adobe After Effects. So let's start with our shape tool in here. If I left click on them and I hold, I can see all of the shapes that I can create. So let's start with the rectangle tool. Now as you see, there are new options in here. The first one is fill. As it sounds, in here you can select and change the color of your shape layer. For example, if I click on the word fill, in here I can change the color type of my shape layer. So let me show you in an example. If I click in here, right now the color is set on gray. So let's make it a white color. Now if I hold left click and I drag my mouse button, as you see I have created a rectangle. Now if I click on fill, I can select the no fill color option, linear, or lastly the radial one. And the second option is stroke. It has the same setting as our fill option. So for example, I can increase the stroke width to something like 49 pixels. And let's change its color for a better visibility. So some of you might notice when I created the rectangle, few things appeared in here. So let's review them and see what they are. So let's close the panels first so we can go through them one by one. Now as you see, if I click on the tiny triangle, my shape layer is made from a content and transform panel. So what are they? So let's start with the content. As you see, when I click on it, the next tab is our rectangle. And if I click on it one more time, I will have more options. Well, the first one is rectangle path. And now the first one is size. In here, we can change the size of our shape. This little chain option in here can help us to maintain our shape proportion. So if I disable it, now I can change each axis without influencing the other one. The next one is position. And with this property, I can change the position of my shape layer. And the next tab is roundness. So if I increase the roundness, my rectangle becomes a circle. The next tab is a stroke. So the first tab is a color, and it's the same as the stroke color in here. The next one is opacity, which you can change the opacity of your shape layer. The stroke width is the same, you can make your stroke thicker or bigger. So right now we are going to set it on 50. And the next one is the line cap. If I change it, nothing will happen, and it's because you will need a path created by pen tool for this one. Same as like join and meter limit. Now, if I hit the plus button on dashes, it creates dashes for my path. And in here, I can increase the dashes and offset them. The taper option allows you to change the beginning and the end of your stroke, and this will come handy in lettering animation. And the next option is wave. And as you see, it creates a wave effect for our stroke. Alright, now fill option is the same as this one. Now the important part, the transform panel. This is where you usually animate your animation by animating the transform panel. So the first one is anchor point. As you see, when I click on it, a circle with two cross lines in the middle of it appeared in here. Well, anchor point is one of the important things in After Effects, and it's kinda a center point of a layer, and it affects how a layer would behave in terms of its transform panel. And the transform panel, well, it is in here. And now let's see how it affects. So to change the anchor point, you need to select the anchor point tool in here. And the shortcut for it is the Y letter. So if I bring the anchor point down, And if I, let's say, rotate this shape, as you see, it rotates from where our anchor point is. Or if I change the anchor point one more time to here, as you see, it rotates from here. And now if I put it in the middle, we can rotate it from middle. Here we have a position, but also we have a position in our path. But we'll talk about the path option more later on. Now in here we have a scale, and also we have a skew. In here we have a skew axis, which we can change our axis. And now we have rotation in here that we have talked about it a few seconds ago. And lastly, here we have opacity. Now, lastly, we have the transform panel. Well, now, if you're a beginner user, you might ask, what is the difference? Well, first, let's rename our shape layer to rectangle by pressing enter. Well, the transform panel belongs to the rectangle, where it only controls the rectangle layer, while the second one generally controls the entire layer. And a shape layer can have many layers inside of it. For example, let's create a circle. Now, as you see, in our content, we have an ellipse and we have a rectangle. Now, if I click on the transform panel, as you see, if I move, both layers are moving together. They are scaling, they are fading. So as you saw, this transform panel controls the entire shape. And now, for example, our ellipse transform only controls the circle layer. Now let's delete these layers and let's talk about few shortcuts when you're creating a shape in After Effects. First one is if I hold space while I'm creating a shape, I can move my shape. If I hold shift, I can create an equal shape on each side. Now, for a polygon tool, you can add and remove points by using up and down arrow key on your keyboard. Something to mention is that you can change it in polystar path in here as well. Well, let's create another polygon and let's increase its numbers one more time. Now if I want to create the original polygon, After Effects creates the latest shape that I made. So to fix that, all you need to do is that you need to double click on the shape tool in here. Something to mention is that you can change the roundness of a shape by right and left key on your keyboard. So I can create this flower by just playing with my arrow keys. Now lastly, let's talk about our effects panels in here. These are the effects panel, and some of them we will need in near future and some of them we are not going to use. The information panel gives us an information for our layer, which we don't need, so I'm going to left click and then I'm going to close it. Same as audio, we will not work with any audio in this course. Well, about the preview, we will talk about it more later on, but we don't need it for this course. The effects and preset tab are important, and we will use few of these effects in this course. The align tab, we will use it frequently, and I don't need the library tab. The character and the paragraph, we are going to use them for creating the text. And the tracker, we don't use it for this course, same as the counter will fill. Now let's save this workspace. So next time when we open After Effects, we will have this workspace. So to do that, let's go towards the window panel, and in workspace, let's click on Save as a new workspace. I'm going to call it the Skillshare workspace. And now I can have access to my workspace in here. Alright, now in this video we are going to talk about basics of animation in After Effects. So let's create a shape for ourselves. To do so, this time instead of going towards our shape tool, we can try another way. We can right click in empty space in here, and then in new section we can just click on shape layer. Well, nothing happened except we have an anchor point in here. Well, something happened, but we can see it. The thing is, After Effects created a shape, but we still didn't tell the After Effects what shape and with what color. So let's add them. We can go towards the add menu in here, and then we can add an ellipse. So as you see, we have a blank ellipse in here. And if I scroll with my mouse scroll, but we still need to add a color into it. So again, in add menu, let's add a fill color for it. Something to mention is that the layer order in After Effects matters a lot. So for example, if I put the fill above the path, now everything changed. So let's rename the shape layer to circle by pressing enter. So right now, if I want to move my shape layer, I can do it because I am on the shape panel. And if I click and drag, I'm going to draw a shape. So to undo my action, I can just press Ctrl+Z. Now to move an object in After Effects, you need to go towards the selection tool, and the shortcut for it is V. So from this point, if I want to select an object, I'm going to press V on my keyboard. Now I can select it and I can move it wherever I want. Now going towards the next tool, it is the hand tool. And by that you can move your canvas. You can also do that by holding the space. So if I go towards my selection tool by pressing V and then I press and hold the space, I can do that again. The next one is zoom tool, and the shortcut for it is Z. So you can zoom with the left click, and you can zoom out by holding Alt and then pressing the left click. Something to mention is that you can always adjust your screen in here. I can select fit to 100% or into 1.5%. Right now I'm going to set it on 25%. Now that I have this circle, I want to align it to the middle. To do that, I'm going towards my Align tab, and I'm going to make sure it is on Composition, and then I'm going to select Align horizontally and then Align vertically. Now I am going towards my selection tool by pressing V on my keyboard. And then I'm going to go towards the content, and I'm going to go towards the ellipse path, and I'm going to increase its size. And I'm also going to move it in here. Now we can go towards the transform panel. Now notice on the left side of each name there's a stopwatch. Now as you see, if I hover on it, it says toggle ability of property to change over time. So if I click on it, it will create a diamond shape icon, otherwise known as a keyframe. Now if I move my time indicator 7 frames forward, which I can see it in here. Now if I move the X value of my position, as you see, my circle moved towards the right. Keep in mind that the movement is based on the anchor point. As you see, right now it's not pretty because the anchor point is set in here. So I am going to delete this keyframe. Either I can use the anchor point tool, or I can use the anchor point property in here and then I will fix my anchor point. Now this time I'm going to set a keyframe on position, and I'm going to go a few frames forward, and then I'm going to move it in here. Now to preview your animation, all you need to do is that you need to press space on your keyboard. Now as you see, there are a few seconds free space before our animation starts. To fix this issue, we can just go a few frames before our animation starts, and we can press B, or we can just drag this panel towards the left or right. And I can cut the end of it by pressing N. Now it only shows this length. As you see, we have a basic movement, but let's put the keyframes from 2 to 2 seconds and 12 frames. As you see, the movement is really linear and there are no sense of life into it. Now, there is one important rule when it comes to animation, and it's 12 principles of animation, which we don't go into them for this course. But however, we'll mention few of them in this course. As you see, these two diamond keyframes are what we call them linear keyframes. If we go towards the graph editor panel in here, it looks like a complicated thing, but click on this option in here and then select the speed graph. Now it only shows you the speed of an object over time. Right now, as you see, it is a straight line. So one of the important principles in animation is easing. The movements of objects in the real world, such as the human bodies, animals, vehicles, and etc., needs time to accelerate and slow down. For this reason, more frames are down near the beginning and end of an action, creating a slow in and slow out effect in order to achieve more realistic movement. So to achieve a slow in and slow out, just select your keyframes and right click on them, and in Keyframe Assistant, click on Easy Ease. Now as you see, our circle starts to gain speed slowly and then becomes fast at the end. As you see, it looks much better compared to what it was before. And I'm not going to go any deeper than this because I will provide another course about working with keyframes and graph editor later on. But this is the basics of animating that we need for this course. So with this knowledge, let's start. Alright, now that we have learned the basics of the software, it is time to create a simple animation for ourselves. Well, before we start, there is an important concept that you need to learn, and it is how to import files to After Effects. So to import a file into After Effects, all you need to do is you need to go towards File, and then in Import section, you need to click on File, or you can just press Ctrl+I to do it. Now, this is my file, and I made this simple UI in Adobe Illustrator. Now, if I select the file, add here, my import add is set on footage. Now, if I import it, now again After Effects asks me that I need to select the import kind. Let's set it on footage. Now in layer options, it is going to ask me whether I want to merge every single layer of my design into one, or I want to pick up a specific layer. For this one, I'm going to set it on merge layers, and then I'm going to click on OK. Now if I double click on it, now I will have this piece. But when I designed this UI, I have put everything in a separate layer. So let's go towards Illustrator to see it. Now as you see, on my right side where my layers are, I have everything on their own layer. And as we have talked about it before, each layer has its own transform panel. So I need to import my files in the right way. Okay, back to After Effects, I'm going to delete this layer. And then I'm going to press Ctrl+I. Now this time I'm going to set the import kind on composition. And this time After Effects created a composition from our layer, and it brought back every layer as its separate layer into it. Notice that you can also create a composition from a layer by just simply dragging the layer into a composition icon in here. As you see, After Effects created a composition from our layer. Now, one more thing to mention is that, for example, if I import this file one more time and I set the import kind on footage, I still can change it by changing the import kind to composition. But make sure when you are importing it, set the footage dimension into a layer size, not the document size. Now, as you see, I have the composition, and if I double click on my comp, I have the layers in here. But for this course, we are still going to create this interface inside of After Effects because we will need to learn a few more things as we design the piece in here. Alright, now let's start with designing the background. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to click on New Composition in here, and then I'm going to call it Main. Now I'm going to set the width on 1080 and the height on 9020. So let's leave the frame rate on 24 frames per second. And let's change the duration from 8 seconds to 10 seconds. And now let's hit OK. Now let's press Ctrl+I to import our file. And now I'm going to import it as a composition. Now I'm going to create a new folder in here, and then I'm going to call it Illustrator Layers. And I'm going to hold Shift, and then I will select these two files, and lastly I will drag them into new folder. And now I'm going to create another new folder, and I'm going to call it Main. Being organized in After Effects is a key factor. Try to be clean about your structures as much as you can. So right now we need to create this background. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to drag the color guide towards my comp. And then this time I'm going to create a background by creating a solid layer. A solid layer is a pixel layer. I will tell you the difference once we get to Puppet Pin tool. But for now, just keep this in your mind. So right click on empty space in here, and then in new click on solid. Solid layer setting is similar to comp settings. So I'm going to call it background, and then I'm going to set the units on pixel, and same as pixel aspect ratio, I'm going to leave it on square pixels. And then I'm going to change its color by using the eyedropper tool in here, and I will pick this color. Right now, as you see, the color of background is different from what I've made in here. And I can't really change the color of background. As you see, our background layer only has a transform panel. So to fix it, we will add a fill effect into it. So let's just move the background in here. So this time we don't choose the wrong color. And now go towards your effects and preset tab, and in search bar search for fill, and then drag the fill effect into background. Now as you see on the right side of the project panel, I have the effects control panel, and if you don't have this panel, go towards window panel and then select it in here. Now I am going to focus on my color guide layer by pressing this dot icon in here. This is called a solo function. If you press this icon on any layer, After Effects is going to hide the rest of the layers, and it will only show you the layer you're selected. So I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to change the color, and now I'm going to remove the dot from the color guide. Now we need to create these two circles. Well, it is pretty simple. I'm going towards my shape tool, and I'm going to hold shift, and then I'm going to create a circle like so. And now I'm going to rename it. Now, as I said earlier, layer order matters in After Effects. So I'm going to drag them above so we can see them. And then I'm going to select the circle, and then I'm going towards my fill panel. And then we're going to choose this color. So let's see if we choose the right color. Well, yes, we did. Now our anchor point is not at its right place. So let's press Ctrl plus Alt plus Home together to move it towards the middle. And now I'm going to set the anchor point right on the bottom right edge. Now for the second circle, either I can create it by using the shape tool, or we can duplicate it. In order to duplicate something, you can just go towards the edit and then select duplicate. Now we have a duplicated layer in here. So I'm going to drag it and place the anchor point right on top left edge. And then I'm going to change its color. Now it is time to save our project. To do it, go towards File and you need to click on Save. And then I'm going to call it the UI design. So in this video, we will talk about masks. Masks in After Effects allow you to determine the visibility of a specific parts of a layer. So let's say I want to create a circle like this. And I want half of this circle. Well, working with masks are pretty simple in After Effects. If you are working with a shape layer, if you select your shape layer, you will have two options in here. The first one will create a shape for you. However, the next one will create a mask for you. So if I go towards my canvas, as you see, if I select the mask tool, my mouse cursor changes into a square with a circle in the middle of it. While when you are creating a shape, your mouse cursor changes into a star. So select the shape and let's hide half of it. Now, as you see, I have a mask in here. Note that there is no limit in creating the masks, but in here in mask 1, we have few options that I want to talk about them. The first one is mask mode. These are just basically modes from Photoshop. You can change them from add to subtract and so on. The next one is inverted option, which is going to invert your mask. The next one is mask path. Well, you can simply change your path and animate it with this option. To change your path, go to your selection tool and hold shift and then go towards one of these squares and then left click on them. And then you can change it. Well, the next option helps you to feather your mask. The next one is the opacity, and the last one you can expand your mask. Alright, so right now let's create our avatar background. Either we can do it by creating a solid layer and masking it, or there is a better way which we are going to do it. I really want to redesign this piece close to original design. So if I select the avatar background, as you see in here, it gave me the size information. The circle size is 428 by 428. So let's go towards new and let's create a shape layer. Let's rename it to avatar background. And in add menu, let's add an ellipse. And lastly, let's add a fill into it. And now let's change the color. Now that we have the size, I'm going towards the ellipse path and then we change the size. And now let's go towards our selection tool and let's move it in here. So again, we need to fix its color. Okay, now that we made our avatar background, we need to organize our layers a bit. I usually organize my layers by color labeling them. For example, I'm going to select my background layers. And then in here, by clicking on this square in here, I'm going to change its color to dark green. And then I'm going to give my avatar background this color. And this trick becomes handy when you are working with many layers. So I can click on one color and then select every green color in the layer panel. Alright, now let's start with character design. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going towards my Align tab and I will make sure that my avatar background is aligned. Now let's go towards the Illustrator layers and Form layers and let's find our face. Well, it is a rounded rectangle and the size of it is 199 by 297. So let's create a shape layer by going towards New and then Shape Layer. And in Add Menu, I'm going to add a rectangle and then let's add a fill for it. And also let's change its color. And now let's go towards the rectangle path. And now let's turn off the chain option and then I'm going to type the dimensions. And now let's round it a bit. Okay, now let's rename it to face. And let's go towards our selection tool and move our face in here. And now we need to create these cheeks. So let's create a circle. So I'm going towards my shape tool and then let's select a darker color. So let's select the eyedropper tool and change the color. Now let's hold shift and let's create a circle. And let's put the anchor point into middle by pressing Ctrl plus Alt plus Home. And now I only need a quarter of the circle and the rest of it I need to mask it. Well, if I want to do it with the masking technique that we learned in the last video, it will be pretty hard as you see. Well, this is where the TrakMatte comes in. Well, TrakMatte is the same as mask, but the technique is different. Well, first let's delete the mask. In order to use a TrakMatte, you will need a shape layer as a mask. So for this example, I want to hide everything outside of this face, so the best way is to use the face as a mask. So let's duplicate it by pressing Ctrl plus D and let's move it above, and I tell you why in a second. And let's rename it to mask. Now let's change its color to red. So first make sure your TrakMatte panel is on. So if you don't have this panel, make sure these two icons in here are blue. Now the important part is that the mask should be above the layer that you want to hide or reveal. So let's rename this one to cheek and then go towards the TrakMatte channel in here. Now we have four options. The first one is Alpha Matte. As you see, After Effects uses this mask and shows us the layer that is inside of the mask and hides the rest of it. And the Alpha Invert is going to do exact opposite thing. It is going to hide inside of the mask and reveals what is outside of the mask. Well, the Luma channel is basically the same, but it takes the effect from the Luma channel. And we don't really need to go deeper than this. So right now I'm going to set it on alpha. So our cheek is a little big, so let's decrease its size. And now let's press S to reveal the scale and then change its size. Now let's repeat the same step for the next one. So let's duplicate the cheek and then let's move it in here. And then let's duplicate the mask and move it up.
And as you see, the mask is already on alpha. Alright, all done.
Okay, now in this video we are going to create our eyes. So let's go towards the Illustrator layers and let's select the left eye. As you see, the dimension is 68 by 68. So this time let's go towards the shape tool and create a circle. And let's press Ctrl plus Alt plus Home to move the anchor point towards middle. And now let's go towards the ellipse path and let's change the size to 68. And now let's hold space, and now let's go towards the color guide, and sadly we don't have this color, so I am going to use the eye as a reference. Okay, so we don't need this layer, so let's delete it, and let's move the eye in here, and now let's rename it to left eye. And let's duplicate it and move it towards the right. And let's call this one right eye. Now, in order to create an eyeball, I'm just going to duplicate the left eye. And then on ellipse path, I'm just going to halve its size. So I'm just going to right divide by 2. So let's bring back the eye one more time to get the eyeball color. So let's delete it and let's rename it to left eyeball. And now let's duplicate it one more time and let's move it above. And let's change its name to right eyeball. And lastly, let's adjust it by arrow keys on our keyboard. So let's change their colors. Now the important section of this video is that right now if I want to move my face, as you see the rest of the parts are not moving. So we need to link eyes and cheeks into face. Well, this is where parenting comes in. Parenting is the process of setting up multiple layers so that the movement of one layer follows the movement of another layer. And the parenting section is always in here. We basically want every related character parts follow the face, so we need to parent them to face. So I am going to parent my cheeks to my face by using the pick whip tool in here. Now if I move it, as you see the cheeks are moving along with them as well. Right now for the eyes, first we need to create a mask for them. In that way, they will move inside of the eye. So let's duplicate the right eye and let's put it above eyeball. Let's call it mask. And now let's set the TrakMatte channel on alpha in order to make it work. So let's do the same thing for the left eye. So let's duplicate it and let's call it mask. And now let's set the TrakMatte channel to alpha. And now I'm going to select the right eyeball and mask, and I'm going to parent it to right eye. And then I'm going to parent the eye to the face. So let's test it. As you see, when I move my face, the right eye moves with it as well. So I'm going to do the same thing for the left eye. I'm going to parent these two to the left eye and the left eye to the face. And now, as you see, our character moves correctly. Okay, now in this video, we will learn how to create a mouth for our character.
So in order to create a mouth for our character, we need to learn the basics of pen tool. So the pen tool is located in here, and if I hold on it, I can have access to it. So by selecting pen tool, the first thing you need to do is that you need to set a stroke for your pen. So this time I'm going to turn off the fill option, and then I'm going to change the stroke color to white. And then on my canvas, if I click, I can create straight lines like this. But also, if you hold and drag, you can create curvy lines like this. Now that we created this path, but first let me change its color so we can see it better. Right now we can change our stroke in here. We can make it bigger or thicker. Now pay attention to the edges. Remember when we were talking about creating shapes, when we went into shape panel and then in stroke tab, we couldn't really use the line cap option. But now if we select this option, we can change the path edges. Now, the next option is Add Vertex tool. By using this tool, you can add points into your shape, and then you can change your shape using these handles. The next tool will allow you to remove points from your shape. The next one is Convert Vertex tool, where you can select a point and change it. Now, for this one, since the design phase is already a bit long, I won't create the mouth. Instead, we are just going to drag it towards our face. And same as our hairs. Don't worry, we'll work with pen tool once we want to create our eyes for our character. But don't forget, when we are adjusting it, we will need to parent these to our body. Alright, all done. Okay, so in this video, we are going to talk about type tool. Well, to have access to our type tool setting, we need to go towards the character panel. And if you don't have this panel, go towards the window panel and then select it in here. So right now, if I select the type tool, which is in here, and then I start to type, for example, the username, as you see, we have this text. Now, on the first option in here, we can change the fonts. For this one, for example, I'm going to select Helvetica font. And then in here, you can change the font size. You can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. And in here, you can change the color. In here, you can add a stroke for your text. You can swap between them by pressing this little icon in here. And you can disable the stroke in here. In here, you can increase the leading for your text. Now, in here, you can add spacing between letters. On here, you can make your stroke bigger or smaller. And this panel can help you to select if you like to have a stroke or fill first. And this option, you can vertically scale your text. And with this one, you will scale it horizontally. And now let's bring back everything to its normal size. And this one is baseline shift. And lastly, this option can help you decrease the space between each character. And in this option, you can change the font types. And now this is the paragraph panel where you can adjust your text. Okay, so now that we have the basic knowledge, I'm going to import what is left from our design in order to finish the design phase. So I'm going to bring the password bar, and then I'm going to bring the username bar as well. And also we are going to adjust them a bit, however I will fix them later on when we are on break. And now we need to bring our signing button Alright, done. Okay, so I took a quick break, and in between I also fixed the position of our shapes. Now in this video we are going to slowly animate our design. So the first thing we do, we are going to animate this mouse pointer. And the way we are going to animate it is that the pointer comes in and then it rotates, and then we are going to type the username, and then it goes towards the password, and lastly it goes towards the button, and then it goes off the screen. So I'm going to select the mouse, and the first thing I do is that I'm going to press Y, and then I will move my anchor point up. The reasoning behind is that if I go towards my transform panel, I can rotate my shape really better. Let's press Ctrl+Z to undo the action, and then let's press V to go towards the selection tool. And now let's move our mouse pointer in here, and this time I'm going to press R to bring up rotation, and then I'm going to adjust my mouse. Now, usually I start animating on 1 second, because in that way I can offset the keyframes easier. So I'm going to press P to bring up position, and then I'm going to set a keyframe, and then I'm going 12 frames forward, and then I'm gonna bring it in here. And then I'm gonna go towards the 2 seconds, and I'm gonna move it in here. And then again on 12 frames forward, we will move it in here. And then I'm gonna go 1 second forward, and then I'm going to copy this keyframe by pressing Ctrl+C, and then I will paste it by pressing Ctrl+V. And this gap is for when we want to animate our username, and even we can increase its time a little bit more. And then we will move it down, and then we are going to copy and paste this keyframe, and then 12 frames forward we are going to move it towards the bottom, and then we will click on the button, and the pointer is going back a bit, and then it goes off the screen. So this is the basic animation, and remember, we will change the movement a lot during the next videos. Now, as you see, the movement is not good and realistic. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to select the keyframes, and then I'm going to right click on them, and then in keyframe assistant, I'm going to select the easy ease. Now the movement is better. Now we are going to add depth into our animation by adding a rotation into our mouse pointer. Now if I hold Shift and then I press R simultaneously, it will open rotation property while it shows our position property. Now, till here, everything is good. So I'm going to click on this icon again in order to create the same keyframe. Now, I'm going to rotate it up, something like this. And again, in here, we'll click on diamond icon in here so we don't change any property in between. And 2 frames forward, I'm going to change the direction. Something like this should be fine. And then we will move till here. And since we don't need to change any property, we will set another diamond keyframe in here so we don't change any property in between. Okay, now let's move keyframe in here. Now let's assume we press the button in here. We can move our mouse pointer a bit up. However, we will need to change these 2 keyframes in order to make it work. Now let's decrease the spacing between it. And also I will delete this keyframe and I will copy and paste this one. So in that way there will be no animation in between. Now we need to adjust our rotation. And then when it goes down, we need to adjust rotation like this. And then it's going to click on the button. And then we will rotate it like this. And then we change it like this. So this is our basic animation. Let's press F9 to apply standard easing and then let's watch. So let's press space to view it. So there is a small delay in here, which I'm going to fix it by dragging a keyframe in here. So this is our basic animation. Now in next video we will work on movements a bit more. So far we have this basic animation, so let's press space to view it. Now the first thing we need to do is that we need to fix these 2 keyframes. Right now the movement is a bit slow in this phase. So select these 2 keyframes, go towards the graph editor, and then we will use these handles and we will push them into middle. Okay, now it's better. Now in real life most movements are happening in a circular path, and in animation we call this movement an arc. Motions of all living beings such as people, animals, birds, fish and so many more do not happen in straight lines, and they will happen in arcs. So in this video we will create arcs for our animation. So in order to start, we will select all of our position keyframes and then we will right click on them. And then we will select keyframe interpolation. And then we will change spatial interpolations from linear to Bezier. Now as you see, we will have these handles in here that can help us to create arc for our animation. And now I'm going to select these 2 keyframes and then I'm going to create an arc like this. And with these 2 I'm going to pull the handles up. And now let's watch. Okay, as you see, the movement is much better and realistic, but we will still need to adjust our mouse pointer a bit. In here, we have a small problem. We need to adjust and remove few keyframes. So first, let's drag handles a bit, and also let's fix rotation in here. And let's delete this keyframe. We also need to fix rotation when it's in here. Same as here. And since we don't need any rotation change, we will add a diamond keyframe and then we will change it. Alright, now when it is in here, let's add a small delay by shifting the keyframes. So let's delete this keyframe and let's drag this one in here. And now let's delete this one. Now we will add a small delay by copying and pasting this keyframe. And lastly, we'll fix it in here. Now, this is much smoother, but we'll still work on it in next video. Okay, it is time to talk about Puppet Pin tool in After Effects. When we were creating a solid layer in last videos, I told you to keep in mind that a solid layer is a pixel layer. Now in here I have two rectangles. One is created as a vector versus one with a pixel. The vector layer are basically made with mathematical softwares and you won't lose quality if you zoom like this. However, the pixel layer will lose quality and the edges become chunky. That being said, Puppet Pin tool only works on the pixel layers, so you can't use Puppet Pin tool on shapes or rasterized layer. Now the Puppet Pin tool is located in here, and if I hold on it, there are several options in it there. I won't go deeper because it will take a lot of time to explain all of them, and I will explain them in a separate course later on. So if I put pins on a shape, as you see, it won't work. So if I go towards the Illustrator layers, I will just create 3 pins on my shape. Now if I press U on my keyboard, I will see the 3 keyframes that After Effects automatically generated. Now I can use these pins to basically move and deform my shape. So this is basically the Puppet Pin tool. Now there are some settings that I want to talk about them. The first thing is this icon. If I click on it, it is going to rasterize my layer, meaning it will treat it as a shape layer. And if you do that, you won't be able to work with your Puppet Pin tool. So make sure this option is always turned off when you are working with Puppet Pin tool. Now if we delete these keyframes, and now let's go towards the Puppet Pin tool one more time, and let's set expansion on 2. Now I will explain them in a second, and let's create a pin. Now the first option in here is mesh, which it shows you this kind of spider web around your shape. However, expansion is just defines how much you want to deform your shape. Note that you don't really want to go like this, just try to hold it a bit more than your original shape. Now the density can help you to create a more realistic deform. For example, if I create another pin and then I put density on 1, it is going to be really hard to deform it. Now let's put another pin in here to demonstrate it better. So if I increase it to something like 12, as you see, it works better. So this is the basics of Puppet Pin tool. In next video, we will learn about it. So far we have this animation. Now let's delay this action a bit further. And in here we have a small problem. The movement is really fast and bad, so we need to adjust some keyframes. Okay, it's a bit better, but still I am going to increase the timing between it. Okay, it is much better now. Now let's add 3 pins to our mouse pointer. And I will also fix the settings on my Puppet Pin tool. And I will turn the mesh off. Now I'm going to press U to reveal the keyframes. And then I will deform the mouse pointer frame by frame to create a sense of life and give our animation more depth. Now let's zoom in and let's copy the first keyframes and paste them in here. So now let's change it a bit in here. Well, there's nothing much I can say except we are just adding more depth to our animation. Okay, let's watch. Now this is good. Okay, so far we have this animation. Okay, so we accidentally removed a keyframe in last video in here, so we need to add a small delay. So in here, let's press U to reveal the keyframes, and let's select these keyframes and let's move them to 8 seconds. And then let's set a diamond keyframes in here. And now let's paste them on here, so we don't have any animation change in between. But as you see in here, we have a small problem. So we need to delete this position keyframe. Alright, good. Now we need to animate the buttons. So let's start with username. When you click on it, it's going to get smaller a bit, and then it scales to its original size. So let's press S, and when mouse pointer is almost in here, let's set a keyframe. And let's go 5 frames forward, and now let's set it on 90%, and then again 5 frames forward, let's set it on 100. And let's apply standard easing into it. Now we can also decrease the timing between the keyframes by 2 frames in order to get a smoother animation. Now when it goes in here, we click on password bar and we will animate it. And we can also copy scale keyframes from username bar, and then we can paste it in here. Okay, but we need to push it a bit back. So when it's in here, we are going to add a scale keyframe for this one. Now the movement is a bit slow in my opinion, so I'm going to adjust it a bit further. Okay, this is good. And now it is time to animate our eyes. So we can animate them one by one, or we can animate both of them at the same time. And if you want to animate both of the eyes at the same time, you will need a null. To create a null, you can right click in empty space in here, and then in new, you can select null object. So what is a null object? A null object is an invisible layer that you can create to be a super parent. But first, let's move the anchor points towards the middle, and let's move it in here. And also let's rename it to the eyes. And let's also make it a bit smaller. Now let's parent the eyeballs to the null. And let's parent the null to the face. Now if I move the null, as you see, I can control my eyes. Now let's press Ctrl plus Z, and now let's zoom out a bit. Now let's set a keyframe on position, and let's make our eyes follow the mouse pointer. So let's move it down. Then towards here. And then here. Now when it goes up, we're gonna move it towards its original position. And then when it goes down, we'll just move it a bit down. Now, to create a sense of security, we will need to create a new set of eyes for our animation. But first, let's create a blink animation for our character. So let's select the left eye. And now let's turn off the chain option. I can change the Y value to get a blink. So let's find the left and right eye and then press S to bring up a scale value. And at the beginning, let's create a keyframe. And now let's go 3 frames forward and then we push it towards 0. And now let's copy and paste first keyframe to get a blink. And now let's copy and paste it in here for another blink. And when our mouse pointer clicks on the password bar, but this time we will delete this keyframe and we will replace it with a closed eye shape. So let's go towards our pen tool. Now let's set the stroke on 9 pixel and the black color is fine, but I will disable the color for it. And then I will create a shape just like this. And then I'm going towards the content, shape, stroke, and I will turn the line cap into round, same as the join. And I'm going to rename it to closed eye. And then I will duplicate it and I will right click on it, and in transform panel I will flip it horizontally. And then we will select both of these layers and I will drag the beginning of it till here so we don't see them at the beginning of our animation. Okay, we need to push them a bit back, and also we need to move them a bit down like this. Okay, now when our mouse pointer goes towards the bottom, we will cut the end of these 2 layers. And then we will find our left eye and right eye . And first we'll set a keyframe so there will be no animation in between. And then we are going to open our eyes. Alright, perfect. Okay, now it is time to animate our text. So when our mouse pointer clicks on username, we have to add a text. So let's go towards our type tool, and the shortcut for it is Ctrl+T. And I am going to write a Skillshare. And then I'm going to adjust it in here. And I'm going to change its color. Now this step isn't basic, but just follow along with me. Now go towards the text panel and then click on Animate menu in here, and then select Opacity. These properties are for animating your text, and if I want to dive into each of them, it will take an hour. You can watch a complete guide to typography in Adobe After Effects by me, or other courses if you want to learn everything about this panel. But anyways, let's turn down the opacity, and then in range selector 1, we will animate the offset value. And this time, when it's in here, I'm going to type the password. So let's create few stars for password. And again, let's repeat the same step. So opacity, we turn it off. And then in offset path, this time, I'm going to animate it faster. And lastly, we will need to bring our pointer above everything. Right now, it merges with the text. All done.